My name's Justine Ginsberg and I'm the host of Health Matters, a public health education show produced by the Farmington Valley Health District. Today we're going to talk about communicating with your healthcare professionals that help you in your life. All of us access and use healthcare professionals, from your primary care physician to the optometrist, sometimes a physical therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a nutritionist, or even a specific specialist. Each of these relationships is important to our healthcare needs, but they can lead to frustration if miscommunication and inaccurate information has been shared. In fact, one of the most popular things I'm asked to speak about on behalf of the Farmington Valley Health District is this exact topic. So today I'd like to welcome Melissa Marquis, a fellow registered nurse and Farmington Valley Health District's emergency response specialist, to discuss all things health talks. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Justine, for having me.
Our pleasure. So this is not your first time on Health Matters.
No.
But we're putting on a different hat today.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about that relationship we have with our healthcare professionals. So let's kind of look at this in a logical way. First of all, choosing a doctor.
Right.
That's a really important decision, and it's often a decision that we have to live with for a very long period of time. So what sorts of things should we be looking for when we're choosing a doctor?
Well, choosing a doctor needs to fit for you. It's a very personal decision in terms of who you want to be in charge of your health care for many years to come, potentially. So you need to feel comfortable with who you're choosing. So there's several things to look at. So consider your own personal choices. Would you prefer having a male or a female physician is probably a good way to initially start. Identifying, whether or not they are a specialist, if you need to see a specialist, what type of specialty, and how are they renowned in their field. So are they well respected among their peers? So you can do some research online, doing some word of mouth, so having conversations with family and friends about who they might recommend. Or if it's a referral from your current physician, does he or she recommend somebody for you specific to that specialty perhaps that you're looking for? So the more choices and factors that you can identify up front, you can start looking at them and then checking them off, and then you can kind of weed through them.
And I suppose also there's if English is not your first language, that maybe you can find, particularly like a primary care physician, that perhaps speaks your mother tongue.
Absolutely.
And if there's cultural sensitivities as well, sometimes choosing somebody who shares similar cultural belief systems might make that healthcare process a little bit easier.
Absolutely, that is a great point, and especially the cultural sensitivity aspect, because there's definitely cultures where certain people may be accustomed to specific just encounters, just shaking your hand or eye contact, very basic, simple things, but they could be easily offended.
And look, I think a little later on we're going to talk about, having those complicated discussions with a healthcare professional, and, the more comfortable you are with someone at the outset, the easier it is to address those changes to your health as life progresses.
Yeah, you need to have somebody that's a good listener, somebody with a good bedside manner. So those are all, again, factors to consider.
Absolutely. I know for myself, I need someone with a sense of humour.
That helps.
So, assuming that we've chosen our doctor, and you might think this is a really silly question, but getting ready for the appointment might seem incredibly simple. Like, where do I have to go? When do I have to be there? Am I there on the right day? But surely there's more for us to actually think about with that appointment. And more importantly, I suppose, what does our doctor need to know from us?
Well, there's definitely several key factors that they'll need to know. So, number one, why are you being seen? Why are you there? Aside
you didn't just turn up.
Just to pop in and say hi. Generally, they want to get paid for something, for a service that they're providing, right? Just like everybody else. So basically being prepared as possible. So identifying the reason why you're there. So your chief complaint in essence. So are you sick with a fever or some other illness? Is this a specialty visit? So again, kind of writing down a list of those complaints, illnesses, sort of onset dates if you can, trying to give as much information up front as possible, but being concise as well, knowing that you have a very specific time period with them. So they'll also need to know your personal and family medical history, so making sure that that's readily available. any medications you're taking, whether it's prescribed by a different physician or particularly if you're on herbal medication or supplements. A lot of people don't think to provide that information, but there's a lot of medications that can counteract or interfere with herbal meds and cause some pretty serious health effects.
And I suppose now that you've raised that, we should also really think about anything that we buy over the counter at the pharmacy. So everything from sleep aids to, you know, Benadryls and, you know, anti-allergy medications. You know, this time of year when there's a lot of allergens, you know, we might be taking things quite innocently thinking that we're doing the right thing, but it might be actually interfering with another medication we're on and we don't think to mention it.
Interfering, or even possibly there might be a better medication that could be used instead of using an over-the-counter medication that you're not familiar with. So yeah, exactly, having that conversation and providing that list. Also important are a list of any other doctors that you see and why. And then if there's been any changes in your health since your last visit, either with that physician or your last, you know, primary care checkup or something.
Yeah, and I think we're all guilty of getting to the end of a consultation with your primary care physician and you get out to the car and you go, oh man, I should have thought to ask. So I suppose having that list of questions from most important to gee, it would be nice if I could know, so you can kind of work down within the time frame that you've got with your primary care physician or with a specialist.
Well, and with healthcare these days, you know, everything's done, or a lot of things are done electronically. So every patient has an electronic medical record, and a lot of times the physicians can actually interact with the patients through that electronic medical record through an email system that's specific for that office. So you might want to even consider talking with the office staff, either at check-in or check-out, whether or not if there was some information that you forgot or need to share, but it's not emergent and you don't necessarily need to phone it in, can you send an email or other means of communicating, just so that they have the information, but they don't need to, you know, reach back out to you, the type of thing.
And you know, for those of us that are technology savvy, it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to quickly communicate with your doctor almost in real time and to save yourself that doctor's visit. But I suppose for the viewers at home that aren't as technically savvy, recognising that letting your doctor know that that is not going to be an option for you. I think we're all guilty of just assuming that technology's moved on, this is the way we're all going to communicate. And if that's not a comfortable platform for you to communicate with your specialist or with your doctor, let them know that so that they're not relying on you to communicate in that form.
Very true.
Now, we know some of the information that our doctor needs to know about us. Well, more often than not, we get information back. So, you know, that sometimes far too much, and sometimes in really big words.
Yeah.
What sort of things should we be thinking about in terms of what our doctor can actually provide us? What are realistic expectations, and how do we get that information in a way that we can digest it rather than kind of feel like we're a rabbit in headlights?
You don't want to be swimming in information and not be able to understand what's just been said to you. So I think at the end of every visit, I think it's important to sort of, in your own words, summarize back to the doctor and just say, okay, so what I think you said in English translation is, here's my overall health status. This is either what my diagnosis or my prognosis is, depending on what the situation may be. These are the treatment options that you've discussed with me, and then the potential barriers or side effects that might be attributed to any of those. This is a list of the new or discontinued medications that we're going to be doing. And again, looking for an opportunity to be able to have that dialogue back, reiterate it back to the doctor, just so that everybody, you're all on the same page. And really most important is, if you are not comfortable with what they told you and you don't understand it, how are you going to be able to either comply or be able to carry out the treatment plan that they're suggesting and recommending?
And you know, I think that's a really important point, and I know that generationally we've changed in the way we look at healthcare providers, but you know, it wasn't that long ago that we genuinely didn't question our healthcare provider.
Right.
You know, what the doctor or nurse said went, and we just did as we were told, and we were compliant and well-behaved patients. But you know, recognizing that your healthcare team is just that, they are your team. They are people that are, you have selected to care for, you know, the most intimate parts of yourself. And I think both of us as nurses, you know, spent our careers working as patient advocates, because that really is the primary role of a nurse, is being a patient advocate. And I think somewhere along the line, some people have forgotten that they are allowed to actually advocate for themselves and what they need and what they want. And to stop your doctor mid-sentence and say, I don't know that I'm comfortable with that, or you know, that doesn't feel like it's going to work with my lifestyle. You are allowed to do that. Your doctor works with you for your well-being. It's not one size fits all.
Exactly.
Another thing, while we're talking about giving and taking information, I know in your background nursing, you have come across this as well. Many people will come and see you and say, so my next door neighbour has been using such and such, and it's worked miracles for their diabetes. I want to be put on the same medication. Why is that not necessarily the best way to look at treatments?
Well, because it really needs to be individualized to the patient. So you need to take into account what your specific medical history is. Do you have allergies? Have you tried this treatment before and it didn't work? Have you tried similar medications and maybe they made your blood pressure go up too high, or it dropped it too low, or you know, maybe you had an adverse reaction to something. So there's a whole lot of factors to consider. You know, doctors don't just blanketly issue out medications and say, well, let's just try this one. You know, there really is a science behind it, and it very much is tailored to that specific individual.
And I suppose for the viewers at home, as healthcare professionals, you really do sometimes feel the frustration in a patient at not being offered a certain treatment option that somebody else they know is using. And I think recognizing that there's often a reason why that hasn't been suggested or why that hasn't been included as part of your treatment plan.
Absolutely. And
it's not that your doctor's hiding something from you.
No, and particularly for medication's sake, they often have to weigh the risk versus benefit, or outweigh the risk versus benefit game. So really, which tips the scale more? So will this medication, will the side effects potentially harm you or cause you to feel less well and more ill, versus will the medication make you feel better and ultimately increase your quality and potentially your quantity of life? So it really is very much of a balancing game, and there's a lot of times where you need to give and take and try different things before you really find something that fits for you.
Absolutely. And look, whenever you and I talk, we always seem to find the pathways. I know that another question I get asked a lot when I'm teaching out in the general public about this particular topic, people will say that, you know, I found something online, there's this new cutting edge medication, you know, I went to my doctor and I told them about it and they looked blankly at me across the desk. I suppose one of the things that viewers at home need to know is that particularly primary care physicians, their job is huge. And you know, medicine is moving at a rate that it's never moved quite this quickly ever before. And our patients have got an opportunity to access information about new, upcoming, newly tried drugs that they would never have been able to access before we had computers and the internet. So if you find something in your surfing studies that you think is going to be important, understand that if your doctor doesn't know what it is, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad doctor. They may not have had time to read the latest Yale study on...
Absolutely. So just give them the information, let them process it. They will gladly take any info you give them, and they will do their own research. And they have specific, whether it's journals or medical dictionaries and different
colleagues.
Yes, thank you. different resources at their fingertips that they can access that the general population just doesn't have. And they can cross-reference, again, what potential reactions might be or interactions might be with their current medication list. So.
And you know, by building that kind of a relationship with your doctor, you're having that two-way communication,
right.
recognizing that maybe they don't have all the answers, but together you're going to try to work it out. That helps you not feel quite so frustrated.
And I think that the physicians probably also feel glad that the patient's actually participating in their own healthcare choices and that they have a vested interest by sharing some information that they've found.
Absolutely. Now that we've sort of segued beautifully to talking about the internet, we recognize that this is now a really valuable tool that all of us have in our lives, and many of us who've become very savvy with using the internet really can delve into all kinds of interesting areas of health treatment. What we do know is that there's a lot of information out there. Some of it is accurate and very informative. Some of it is kind of like pop fiction. How do I know the difference?
Well, so from a professional standpoint, you always want to encourage them to look at the website name. So look at the source. So identifying, is it coming from Dr. Google or from Wikipedia? You do not want to use those. You need to look at trusted, verifiable sources. So for instance, looking at a lot of times there will be disease information or medication information provided through hospitals or academic centers. So those are trusted sources of information. If you're looking at governmental websites, perhaps, Centers for Disease Control, the National Institutes of Health, FDA, those are all good sources of reliable information that you might be able to glean and pull good data from. Other nonprofit organizations perhaps might be able to help provide some info as well, or even medical societies and journals. If you're looking at blogs or just pieces of information on Facebook from, you know, some woman in Arkansas that you don't know and said, this worked, like this medication is the best. It worked for me and it got rid of whatever illness, and then you go out and try and find it, it might not work for you. So
you mean using the same tools of how to get red wine out of a white tablecloth? Dr. Google is not necessarily the right way to go to try to work out how to lower my blood pressure.
No, stay off of social media when it comes to healthcare choices.
And, you know, I think also if there's a price tag attached to the end of advice, like for $19.95,
right.
you should also be a little careful about, you know, what you can buy and how you go about accessing those sorts of remedies.
Your best choice, though, when wanting information and asking questions is your physician and his office staff. If he's too busy or she's too busy, they have nurses there for a reason. They can get you the information, and it doesn't need to be right that moment. They can send it out to you later.
Absolutely. Nurses are fonts of all great information.
Yes.
So recognizing that our healthcare team is not always just our primary care physician and specialists that we see regularly, they can be emergency room physicians, or they can be urgent care center physicians. How do those communications go differently from your average routine visit with your PCP?
Right. So they're not going to have, if you're going to the hospital or an emergency room, perhaps even an urgent care setting, they don't know you at all. So you're literally walking in off of the street. So you have to be able to provide them, again, in a very short, concise, but complete section of your medical history. Again, they need to know your family history. So what's most ideal, and I advocate this for anybody, not just people that have some illnesses or take daily medication or what have you, but to have a wallet card. And I didn't bring one to show, but you can just have a small little wallet card that identifies your name, your date of birth, your physician, your primary care physician's name and phone number, your emergency contact information for your next of kin, if you have one, or who you would like to designate as one. And then again, write out all the list of all of your medications, including the dose, the time you take it, how you take it, the frequency, and then any illnesses, diseases, or surgeries that you've had. So you can put all that information on one card, double-sided if needed, and then just stick it inside of your wallet and I do the same thing, and I just hand mine over anytime I go to a new doctor. Here you go, just photocopy this because I have a laundry list of allergies. So yeah, that's most important.
You know, I think again, when you've worked in an emergency department and you've been that nurse, you understand what happens in an emergency situation where someone maybe has collapsed in public and they're brought in. Maybe they didn't have somebody with them. There's always a nurse who's standing at the end of the bedside going through that person's wallet, their phone, their bag, trying to ascertain A, who somebody is, B, what kind of medications or pre-existing conditions they might have, and that all takes time. If you've got that information readily accessible, it really does speed up treatment, and particularly if you've got a medical alert bracelet.
I was just going to do a little show and tell here. I know you can't see it, but yes, if you have a serious drug allergy, perhaps a serious disease, illness, such like diabetes or some sort of heart disease, maybe you have a pacemaker or something else that needs to be readily identifiable, where it's a life and death situation, you need to have that either affixed to your wrist at all times or even a necklace. And sometimes the newer ones, as we're talking digital and electronic health here, they have a USB component where you can actually use that wallet card and type it into this little USB device that's connected on your bracelet, and they just take the bracelet and they connect it to the computer.
So having that information readily available can really help us to troubleshoot in an emergency situation, and first of all find out what the problem is, and secondly who your next of kin is, so who we need to call on behalf of you.
Absolutely.
So recognizing that there are so many different interfaces that we have with doctors, and we've talked about primary care physicians, we've talked a little bit about specialists, and as always, we're going to be short on time. We also need to think about our mental health, and we spend a lot of time focusing on our physical health, but mental health is important as well. You know, what do we need to tell our mental health professionals and our physical health professionals about our mental health?
Right. So yes, mental health is a topic of great concern these days. You know, and it unfortunately has this stigma attached to it. If you have any type of mental illness, that you're less than what you should be, and that's just not right, because it's an illness, it's a disease, just like as if you had breast cancer or diabetes or something else. So your brain is an organ, and treating it as anything less than that is not right. And so be open, be honest. If you're feeling sad, if you're feeling depressed or angry, or you can't articulate what you're feeling, but you just know there's something not right and it's out of character for you, it's out of norm for you, speak up and just say, I just don't feel right. I can't put my finger on it, but I just need some help.
And you know, recognizing that a lot of the treatments that we have for other diseases or other issues can actually cause some mental health changes. It can make you a little more prone to depression.
Of course.
There are some medications that can also make people feel suicidal. So really important that we do look at our mind and our body as being connected, and that we share that information with both our physical health providers as well as our mental health providers. As always, Melissa, we have run out of time.
Oh my.
It happens every time Melissa comes on the show, which means we're just going to have her back.
I guess.
There's plenty more we can talk about in terms of communicating with our doctors, but recognizing communication is a two-way street, and that by speaking to our doctors about what we need is just as important as getting information from our doctors.
Yes.
As we discovered today, there are many things we need to consider when we talk to our doctors, from how to prepare for an appointment, to writing a list of important questions to ask, to how to discuss uncomfortable topics or ask questions about treatment options. We've learned that communication is definitely a two-way street, and we all have a role to play in ensuring we get the most from our appointments with our doctors, and that we're accurate conveyors of the information about our lifestyles and of those who care for us. For more information about these topics, please feel free to contact us at our website, www.fvhd.org, or on our Facebook page, Farmington Valley Health District. Thank you for watching us today, and until next time, remember your greatest wealth is your health.